This is Josh Friedman in Istanbul, Turkey, or Turkey A, depends how you refer to it nowadays. 3 years ago, I posted the following. Istanbul is probably my favorite city in the world. It's basically achieved that status by default. Not all of the time I've spent there has been amazing. I've fallen for scams, big and small, and I felt unwelcome on more than one occasion. But Istanbul has never turned me off to Istanbul. There are other contenders. It could be Moscow, but the weather and fortress nature of Russia keep me from going there with any regularity. It could be Jerusalem, but things there are complicated. It could be Odessa, Ukraine, but what is there to do in Odessa other than just enjoy living life? And of course, there are other potential contenders that I've never visited. With Istanbul, there's history, beauty, excitement, affordability, and accessibility. Maybe it's just a marriage of convenience, but there's something to be said about a city I return to over and over again, eager to see it and experience another time. That was in July 2019. It's now August 2022. So is Istanbul in 2022 still my favorite city in the world? Yes, it is. There are several reasons why. Part of me would say I'm a little surprised that I still consider Istanbul, or I outright consider Istanbul to be my favorite city in the world. And part of me is not surprised by that. The world has changed so much in the past 3 years since 2019. And much of what I described about Istanbul at the time has surprisingly or not remained the case. So yes, Istanbul was affordable by, I would say, many regards in 2019. In 2022, prices have shot up tremendously, but it still remains very affordable. There's been a tremendous devaluation of the Turkish lira, even bigger of a devaluation than most other currencies. So while yes, there's been inflation all over the world, the inflation in Turkey has been very high, and if you're not making money in lira, then that has kept Istanbul very affordable. But I'm not just here for affordability. 3 years ago, I described the beauty, the history. Of course, that remains. I'm standing here around sunsets with the Galata Tower in back of me here in the Golden Horn, the Haliç area of Istanbul. There's beauty and there's history all around me. That obviously has not gone away. And surprisingly or not, Istanbul throughout COVID has remained relatively accessible, if not very accessible, compared to many other destinations around the world. So those several reasons have kept me coming back to Istanbul, particularly during COVID. Even when Istanbul locked down and Turkey as a whole locked down, for the most part, the lockdown restrictions did not apply to foreigners. As an American, as was the case with many nationalities, I could come and go. Istanbul remained very open from both a tourist and immigration standpoint, and it has been pre-COVID, during COVID, and if you might say this is post-COVID, it still is. But there's much more to a city and what would draw me so much to a city and make it one that I love coming back to and that I would actually deem my favorite city in the world, is much more than just the beauty, the affordability, the history, the accessibility. Istanbul's got so much to it. It's a city that straddles 2 continents. It's not directly geographically in the center of the world, but culturally and darn near geographically, it is in the center of the world. You can travel to and from just about anywhere, coming and going from Istanbul. It's a city that now has a very large airport, one of the largest and most used airports in the world for that matter. It's got 2 major airports, so it's accessible in a bunch of different ways. Istanbul has, to the chagrin of some of its residents, but also in some ways it's been a big perk, is that it's, as I've touched on a bit, it's been a city that's been very open from not just the tourist standpoint, but the immigration standpoint. Turkey's really been attracting not just refugees, but you could say investment migrants and immigrants of all kinds. And Istanbul's become a very multicultural city. A lot of residents might not like that. I, for one, as a foreigner, am not too opposed to that. I very much enjoy the multiculturalism that exists here, and to me there's so much charm here. I love being in a place where I'm surrounded by water. This is a city that is in between 2 seas with a very famous strait and an inlet of that strait, which is right here behind me. So pretty much everywhere you go in Istanbul, there's views, there's water, there are all these things that to me give the city a whole lot of charm, even though it's a big bustling city of 20 million or so people. And unlike other cities I named in that social media post that I made a few years ago, and as I actually alluded to in that post, Istanbul just keeps winning me over, or it keeps me satisfied. I have run into problems here. I alluded to in that post. Maybe this is a topic for another video, but my very first time in Istanbul, I was scammed and I lost more than $500 because of that scam. There are a lot of scammers in Istanbul. I was also physically shoved out of a restaurant. So I did have my struggles here, but unlike with other cities, the more I came to Istanbul, the more drawn I became to the city. I love going around different districts. Before I was based here, I loved staying in one hotel after another in different places in the city. For that matter, I still do that to some extent. I have staycations here in Istanbul, and I love checking out different cities by spending a night or two in an apartment somewhere, in a hotel somewhere. I've become very interested in the Turkish and specifically Istanbul real estate market. Over the past couple years, I've found properties here to be extremely undervalued. Prices have gone up significantly over the past year, but I've become more than just interested. I've become involved in Istanbul real estate. And as I keep touching on, there's just one thing after another that keeps drawing me to the city. There's so many things that I still haven't explored. I love to go on boat rides here, Bosphorus, Golden Horn, you name it. There are islands, there are museums, there are all kinds of places in Istanbul that are extremely scenic, that are interesting to check out, if not very historic, and that I still haven't seen. So it's this city that never really loses my attention and loses my appreciation. And for those reasons and more, Istanbul in 2022 is and remains my favorite city in the whole world.